We also agreed that we will have a mutual inspection of the cell phone with our experts and their experts. Attorney Eric Hertz is helping lead the investigation team with former law enforcement experts who are going to help us with the cell phone download. So everybody will be able to see at the same time.
Nolan Wells' case is back in the conversation again, and this time, the pressure is not coming from one single headline. It is coming from the growing gap between what the family says was agreed to behind closed doors, and what they say the district attorney's office suddenly tried to force through with a deadline that left almost no room to move. And if you have been following this case from the beginning, you already know why that matters. Because once a case like this enters the public eye, every document, every email, every statement, and every delay starts to carry weight. It is no longer just about a phone. It is no longer just about an autopsy. It becomes a battle over control, trust, timing, and the right to know what really happened in the final hours of a young man's life. Nolan Wells disappeared on July 4th after a boat trip to Horn Island with friends. 2 days later, his body was found in the water off the Mississippi coast. Since then, the story has never really quieted down. It has shifted, changed shape, and kept pulling in more attention because the questions around it have never been fully answered. The family's latest message suggests that the next phase of this case is not about whether they are willing to cooperate. It is about whether cooperation can happen in a way that does not shut them out. The new dispute centers on Nolan's phone. According to the family's legal team, the phone was supposed to be examined through a jointly coordinated forensic process, with representatives from both sides involved. They say that was the understanding reached during the July 15th meeting. That agreement reportedly included the possibility of using the digital forensics lab at Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, along with FBI involvement if necessary. In other words, the family says this was supposed to be a shared process from the start. But the latest correspondence suggests that the situation changed. The family says the district attorney's office later sent a letter that demanded the phone be turned over within a 48-hour window, even though the family was out of state at the time and could not physically meet that deadline. That is the point where the conversation turned from routine investigative coordination into something more confrontational. Because in the family's view, that is not what they agreed to. Their attorneys say they never promised to simply hand the device over and walk away. Instead, they say the agreement was that the phone would be examined together, with both sides present, under a clear forensic protocol. The latest letter from attorney Ahmed R. Smith says the family remains willing to make the phone available immediately, but only for the joint examination they say was previously agreed upon. That distinction matters more than it may seem. A phone in a case like this is not just a phone. It can contain location data, app activity, deleted messages, photographs, searches, timestamps, contacts, and digital traces that can help reconstruct a person's final movements. If the public believes content was removed, altered, or hidden, then even the process of examining the device becomes part of the story. That is why Nolan's phone has become one of the most talked about pieces of evidence in this case. The reason the phone drew so much attention in the first place is because the family themselves raised questions about what they saw when they looked through it. Nolan's mother, Christine Wansley, said the phone was tracked through Life 360 and recovered from a friend's house after he went missing. She also said that when the family looked through it, they did not see the kind of social media activity they expected to see from him, which led them to suspect that content may have been deleted. That statement, whether people agree with it or not, changed the public conversation. Because once a family says something appears to be missing from a phone, the internet fills in the rest. People begin to ask whether there were messages that disappeared, whether photos were erased, whether the timeline on the phone matches the timeline of the trip, and whether anyone else touched the device before it was examined. None of those questions are answered just by speculation. But once they begin circulating, they become part of the public memory of the case. And that is exactly why the legal team is now pushing so hard for a jointly observed exam. Please subscribe to this channel, as we cover similar trending cases as this, and drop in the comments the location you are watching from. I want to know how far this case is being followed. Attorney Ahmed R. Smith's recent letter says the family is prepared to make the phone available for a forensic examination, but only under the same process they say was originally discussed on July 15th. The letter asks the district attorney's office to choose a time between Tuesday, August 18th and Friday, August 21st for the joint review. That is a very different message from the idea that the family is dragging its feet. The family is saying, in effect, we are not refusing. We are controlling the process. And that is the part of the story that makes this case feel like it is entering a new phase. Because once there is a dispute over evidence handling, every side begins to think in terms of procedure. Who had the device? Who had access to it? Was the chain of custody preserved? Was there a clear protocol for extraction? Who gets copies of what is found? Who decides which data is relevant and which data stays protected? These are not minor questions. In cases like this, they are the questions. And for the family, there is a larger reason they keep insisting on transparency. They do not appear to trust the idea of a one-sided process. That distrust has been visible in their public statements for weeks. They have repeatedly said they want every step documented. They want their own experts present. They want the FBI involved if needed. They want any forensic exam of the phone to happen in a way that does not create another layer of doubt later. To them, this is not obstruction. It is protection. Protection of evidence. Protection of the record. Protection of the truth. At the same time, the district attorney's office has not publicly admitted any wrongdoing in the handling of the phone. From the office's perspective, the matter may simply be a dispute over logistics, timing, and evidence procedure. But for the family, timing is exactly the issue. A 48-hour deadline is not just tight. It is, in their view, unreasonable given that they were away when the letter arrived. And that is where the latest legal language gets sharp. In the family's response, their attorney says the deadline was not practicable for several reasons. First, there was less than 48 hours notice. Second, the family was outside Mississippi when the letter was sent. Third, the parties had never agreed to simply deliver the phone to the district attorney's office. Instead, they had agreed to a mutually scheduled forensic examination with the relevant experts present. That is a serious accusation, even if it is framed diplomatically. It means the family believes the office moved beyond the original agreement. It also means the family is trying to preserve credibility while pushing back hard. The tone of the letter is not reckless. It is formal. It is careful. It is written to show that the family is not trying to stall the investigation. The legal team says they remain willing to cooperate, but they want the next step handled properly. And in a case like this, that subtle distinction is everything. Because if the family appears unreasonable, the public may turn against them. If the prosecutors appear too forceful, the public may question them. If the evidence is mishandled, everyone will blame the process. And if the process breaks down, the search for truth gets slower, not faster. That is why the phone fight has become more than a technical disagreement. It has become a trust test. Meanwhile, another major part of the story is still unfolding in parallel: the independent autopsy. According to reporting from Reuters and CNN, the family commissioned their own autopsy, and the results did not provide a definitive answer. The independent pathologist, Dr. Roger Mitchell, reportedly described the manner of death as undetermined pending further information. He also pointed out limitations in the examination, including the inability to directly observe certain internal structures. That is important because it means the family still does not have the kind of final clarity they were hoping for. The family's own expert reportedly found a red discoloration on the back of Nolan's head and said that neck injury could not be ruled out as a contributing factor. But again, the larger point is not that the family has a final answer. It is the opposite. Even after a private examination, they are still waiting for a complete picture. That is one reason they are so insistent on having access to the remaining body parts that were not previously available to Dr. Mitchell. According to the family's latest letter, the office had earlier indicated that the doctor would be able to examine the complete body before grand jury testimony, and the family is now asking for dates to make that happen. That detail can sound procedural, but it is actually huge. If a family believes the first autopsy was incomplete, or if the independent expert says he needs more information, then access to the remaining body parts is not optional in their minds. It is essential. Without that access, the independent review remains incomplete, and the family is left stuck with questions that can never be fully answered. That is the emotional core of this case. A young man is gone. A family is grieving. The public is watching. And the evidence that could potentially explain what happened is moving through a process that nobody seems fully comfortable with. The phone is one layer of that. The body parts are another. The autopsy results are another. And the silence around the final conclusions is what keeps driving the story forward. That is also why the case continues to attract national attention. Reuters reported that the NAACP later joined the legal team representing Nolan's family, signaling that the case has grown beyond a local dispute and into a broader civil rights and transparency concern. That sort of involvement usually happens when a case has become symbolic for something larger than itself. In this case, it is not only about one teenager's death. It is about whether the family of a dead black teen can get a process they trust when they believe the public record is still incomplete. That wider context matters. Because once a case becomes symbolic, the reaction is no longer just emotional. It becomes political, legal, and cultural. People begin to ask whether official institutions are acting neutrally. They ask whether the family is being taken seriously. They ask whether public statements are being made to manage perception rather than to answer questions. None of that proves misconduct. But it does explain why this case keeps escalating. And it also explains why the latest correspondence about the phone drew so much attention so fast. The family's own response makes clear that they are not just arguing about a deadline. They are trying to regain control of a narrative that has been built around them for weeks. They are trying to show that they are not hiding the phone. They are not refusing the exam. They are not obstructing the investigation. They are saying the exact opposite. They are ready, but they want the agreed process honored. That is a strong position to take publicly, especially when the internet is already treating the phone like the center of the mystery. So here is the real question now. Was the recent deadline just a procedural push to move the investigation along? Or was it a move that the family believes crossed a line and broke the trust that had been built on July 15th? That is the conflict that gives this story its power. Because if the family is right, then the issue is not only about a phone. It is about whether the investigation is being handled in a way that respects the family's role and the evidence. If the district attorney is right, then the issue may be as simple as making sure the device is secured and examined under proper authority. But either way, the facts now show a clear divide in how both sides see the next step. And while that divide remains, the public will keep asking the same questions. What was on the phone? What was removed, if anything? Why were some body parts not initially available? Why did the independent pathologist still not have full clarity? Why is the family still asking for transparency after so many weeks? And why does every answer in this case seem to open another door instead of closing one? That is the kind of story people do not click away from, because every piece feels like it leads somewhere else. The timeline is still important. Nolan disappeared on July 4th. His body was found 2 days later. The family later commissioned an independent autopsy. Public reporting then said the private exam remained inconclusive, with the manner of death still undetermined. And now, the phone dispute and the body parts request have put the legal battle back in the center. That sequence tells the story better than any single quote can. First came the disappearance. Then came the discovery. Then came the questions. Then came the autopsy. Then came the legal push for transparency. And now comes the fight over exactly how the evidence should be handled. That is why this story is still not over. And for viewers who have been following it from the start, this is the part that keeps them locked in. The sense that one document, one lab result, or one response from the district attorney's office could shift everything again. Until that happens, the case remains suspended between what is known and what is still being fought over. The family says they are willing to make the phone available immediately for a joint forensic examination. They say they want dates, a protocol, and a process that keeps everyone at the table. They also say they want Dr. Mitchell to be able to examine the remaining body parts without further delay. That is where they stand right now. And that is where the story stands too. A contested phone. An incomplete autopsy picture. A family still searching for answers. And a public still waiting to learn whether the investigation will finally move toward clarity or drift further into suspicion. As always, this report is based on publicly available information, correspondence, and current reporting, and details may continue to evolve as the investigation moves forward. No final conclusions should be drawn until the full legal and forensic process is complete.